One of the topics of the week has been about pure progressions. What is a pure progression, and should the Vikings be using as many of them as they are? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network, and thank you so much to those of you who helped us achieve that goal. Today's show is jam-packed. I want to spend a long time talking about pure progression reads, and a lot of the discussion that has come out about that is something I feel I can weigh in on this show. That feels like an appropriate thing, especially because JJ McCarthy is in an offense that uses these more pure progressions, quote unquote, than some of the other offenses out there, and especially a lot of the stuff you see in college. So I really want to explain what that debate has been about, and really there are two very valid sides to it, and I want to get into that. Plus we have the Zoever under, where we'll look at the betting lines for this game, and my rabbits will pick the game as they have all season long, and then your bold predictions come at the end of the show. But first, let's do this pure progression thing. So I would say that this conversation, much to his chagrin, has centered around Kurt Warner. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that really thrives when he's like at the center of a big debate. And he's always tries to be really like tempered and nuanced, and tries to be really crystal clear about his explanations for things, which I have always appreciated so much about Kurt Warner. So Kurt, if you do happen to stumble upon this show, I hope that I represent your opinions properly. Big fan. Between Kurt Warner or JT O'Sullivan, or to a lesser degree Dan Orlovsky, he's a little bit not as much on this side, but there's a big like ecosystem of former NFL quarterbacks. Tom Brady is on this too. Former NFL quarterbacks who played in the 2000s and beyond, who have decided to kind of weigh in on the way that especially Shanahan McVay systems construct their quarterback reads. And the very, 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 very basic difference is a pure progression in the way that these quarterbacks are all critiquing is one where you would go like left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's just looking at like, is that guy open? 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 That's the purest way to do it. And what I'll say immediately as a caveat is that in these systems, the way they practically turn out, they do teach the shortcuts that you're kind of asking for more than it might say on the playbook. But you can say, hey, man, if the safety does this, you might be able to skip to read 4 and that work. Like those shortcuts kind of exist to help you find the right thing quicker, right? So like that is in there, but on paper it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's usually left to right, or it's like short to long on the left and then short to long on the right. But it's something that is typically built so that the progression of your eyes is linear, that you're not going from one side of the field to the other side of the field and then back to the middle and then back to the other side of the field. That's not necessarily what these progressions want. So that's part of the reason, is that it makes the progression physically for your eyes really smooth and easy. The difference is between that and the idea of like more read-based stuff where there's sort of a decision tree. It's less 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and more, well, if it's single high, I go to the left side. If it's too high, I start on the right side. Okay, now we've narrowed down the halves. And then if the corner does this, I throw the flat. If he does that, I throw something else. And you kind of, it's like a flow chart that like moves a little bit more dynamically. But the disadvantage of that is that you can get into very physically difficult spots if you set your eyes and your feet up to throw one throw and then find out that something has happened and it's no longer there. The receiver slips or what, it's like less resilient. The receiver slips or the coverage was disguised and you got or something like that. You'll usually have to cover more physical distance with your feet and your eyes to get set up for whatever the next throw is. And it's also just going to be a little bit slower. There's more information that you have to figure out, which is why guys like Warner and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady were so successful, because they could cerebrally process all that information super quickly and never lose any timing to any of that. whatever would happen, and they could just set themselves up, and then that's fine. Especially Peyton Manning, who was probably the greatest of all time pre-snap, could always figure out what a team was doing, even if they were disguising stuff, and could sort of read ahead and skip ahead and find that it's a different show. But so that's the difference. And if I may paraphrase the video that Kurt Warner put out about a year ago about this pure progression stuff, he uses like a spacing concept. So it would be, say, a flat and a flat. Let me try to draw it out for you, actually. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll draw it out. If you're listening on audio, I'll be as descriptive as possible, but just know that you can come back later, watch the YouTube video, and I'll draw this on a whiteboard for you. It's been a minute since we brought out the whiteboard. I missed this stuff. So the example that Kurt Warner gives in his video, which I'll link in the show notes, please yell at me if I forget, is spacing. Or stick spacing, right? So it starts with a flat. You get a stick that goes along with it, and then you have, I'll call it like an over the ball. They would call this an attack route, I think is the word in the McVay system. Another kind of spot route type thing, and then you'd have like a running back that runs the flat, and it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 across the field. So the first flat route, and then like a quick out, which is known as a stick. And then you'd get to the 3, which is the middle of the field, and then you get to the backside of the read, which is 4 and 5. The disadvantages of this is that 4 and 5 never see the ball. Something in 1, 2, and 3 is going to be attacked. Like something there is going to be found, or the quarterback is going to get pressured. You almost never have enough time, or you just never make it that far in the read before you find something open to get to the 4th and 5th guy. So those guys are kind of just decoys, and you can maybe use something like that. You can make that 4th route maybe a clear out route that, it is a decoy anyways. So you might as well make it, bring somebody deep if you're trying to do some different concept, or really you would just kind of banish whatever receiver you don't really trust the most, your wide receiver 3, or if your tight end isn't much of a receiver, you'd banish them to 4th and 5th in the read, and you would kind of move accordingly. So the argument goes that we would rather take a concept like that and run it from the middle out. So you'd split the field in half, and you'd almost make it like a triangle read. So I'll use a different concept called Hank. That's like the most quintessential triangle read. So Hank is curl flat on either side of the ball, which immediately puts certain defenders in conflict if they have to kind of cover between the curl and the flat, and then you'd have something else that lines up over the ball. So you would start with that over the ball. So over the ball just means, directly in front of the center. It's right in front of your face. That's the first thing. And then depending on what happens, you decide in the moment if you're going to read the left side or the right side. So let's say a bunch of defenders really hug that route over the ball. Let's say they overcommit to the middle of the field. Then you would say, okay, somebody is going to be on the side that those defenders came from. Let's say they all come from the left. You go read the left side and decide what goes on from there. And usually in a triangle read, you are reading a cornerback who's now in conflict. So he has to decide, am I covering the flat or am I covering the curl? And if he covers the curl, we throw the flat. If he covers the flat, we throw the curl. So you kind of go 1, 2, 3, and it makes a little triangle. And that's a triangle read. And if you wanted to go to the right, it would make a triangle to the right. And that's your triangle read. That's a more read-based progression. That's also very, very, very common. So here's what I'll say about the McVay Shanahan offense is that it is designed to do a lot more than just purely progress with no flexibility at all. At least as far as I understand it. So next up, I'm going to try to describe kind of my bona fides on this so that I'm not just a podcaster talking out my rear end, but also try to explain why you would build an offense this way and understand the kind of timing-esque problems that come with pure progressions and how these offenses attempt to solve those problems. But of course, it requires proper execution, which is a whole conversation in and of itself. So that'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Very excited that today's episode is brought to you by Zocdoc. Preventative health care is very, very important. I'm going to tell you a personal story here. A couple years ago, I had a mole that looked kind of weird, and I waited like 6 months before I actually went to go see a doctor about it. They ended up taking so much skin off that I still have a scar, and it had gotten that out of hand that they really needed to do like multiple procedures, and it was this total nightmare. Don't wait. Go get something checked when it feels off, not just dermatology, whatever it is. If something feels weird, go to a doctor, and Zocdoc can make all that scheduling stuff easier. If the barrier is that it is just like inconvenient and hard to find a doctor that's in your network that works for you, that has an opening when you need an opening, Zocdoc is there. Get the care you need. Go to Zocdoc.com/LockedOnNFL and find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. This episode is also brought to you by Car Gurus. Car shopping should feel exciting, not confusing. And with Car Gurus, you get the confidence you deserve. They cut through all the noise so you can actually see the best deals on just the car that you want. Because when it comes to that big purchase, you deserve the best deal. Car Gurus makes that whole process simple by giving you real information, real deal ratings, and more listings than anybody else. They have price drop alerts, so if you're trying to find a deal, you can monitor it for a little while, see when that best deal comes up. And they have verified dealerships and upfront pricing, which makes the whole thing feel transparent and stress-free. Car Gurus connects you with trusted dealerships for a transparent and hassle-free buying process. With over 4 million listings, the most of any major online automotive marketplace, you'll always find the best deal. Shop the way you want with the tools, data, and unbiased deal ratings that make it easy. Buy or sell your next car today at cargurus.com. That's CARGURUS.com. cargurus.com. Before we get back into the whiteboard, there are two things I like to take care of. For one, it's my mom's birthday. Please wish her a lovely happy birthday in the comments for me. And two, join the Everydayer Club. It is a new thing we're doing at Locked On that allows you to get podcasts ad-free for just $5 a month, as well as access to a special Discord that we're all hanging out in all the time, talking sports, and a bunch of other features. You can go to lockedonvikings.supercast.com to join there. Let's move on to the whiteboard, though. So if you're watching on YouTube, I've drawn a concept called flag bow. This is a staple concept in Kevin O'Connell's offense, as well as Sean McVay's, as well as pretty much anybody who came off that tree. The concept is as such. There's what I would call a return route. You could call it a pivot route, where the player breaks to the outside as though it's a 5-yard out and then breaks back to the inside. You can see this on Jordan Addison's drop on the goal line at the end of the Commanders game, right before TJ Hawkinson threw that touchdown. You can see them running that concept. It's paired with a corner route. So it's a bit of a high-low, and it's a bit of an outside-inside stretch. And then on the other side of the play, you would have bow, which is an arrow route, which is just a 5-yard hook, and a basic route. So a basic starts with a B, basic bow, and then bow goes with an arrow. Pretty easy to remember, right? So flag bow is like a day one install concept in these McVay offenses. I can cite quite a bit of knowledge for that. Most of my knowledge of these concepts has come from old playbooks that have leaked that I've managed to come in contact with from like 2019 to 2022, as well as some actual sources that I won't talk about. But that's the way that I know these the best and how these play calls work. And usually a concept like flag bow will read from short to long to long to short, and then from the left to the right. So it'll read the return route, which is first, and then the corner route over it. But you're not always really reading it. Is the return route open? Okay, it's not. Is the corner route open? Okay, it's not. You're not really going like that cleanly of a divide between one and the next. You will often be reading a defender. If there is a guy in between that route and he really crashes down on the return route, you don't need to watch the return route develop all the way, which it's a long route. It has to break out and then turn around and then break in. And like, that's a tough thing to run. And sometimes it will be the fourth thing in the read for that reason. But in this particular case, you're really looking at, you need to play with anticipation. You need to see, hey, there is a linebacker that's sitting on the inside of that route's going to run right into. I got to move on. And you have to make that decision and then go to the corner route. And then you can say, hey, there's a safety that's sitting on top of that corner route. I got to move on. So when you ask the question, is that open or not? What you can never, ever, ever be doing in these offenses is waiting to see if it breaks open, because these routes will often not be timed up properly with each other. You need to get your information kind of deductively. So if you don't want to go with the front side concept, you can move to the back side concept. But the way it's really built is that you're looking low and then you're looking high. And then you look to the other side of the field and you look high. So you don't have to go from one corner of the field to the other. You don't have to go kitty corner. You can go from low to high across the field, but stay high, and then back to low. And it makes this very nice progression with your eyes that allows you to really scan and survey the field in a natural way. That's why this is made that way. But it's also meant to time up with the way that these playbooks pair these concepts with the drop back footwork. There's also like super intentionality to that. So let's, instead of flag on the front side, let's talk about choice. So again, for the YouTube viewers, I have drawn choice bow, which is another kind of front side, back side married concept, where choice is probably the favorite quick game of these because it develops very quickly. Essentially, you will have on the far side of one side, in this case, I drew it on the left, so let's go with the left. On the left side, you will have a go route. That's an alert, and usually pre-snap, it's one of those things where you see, hey, I see Justin Jefferson on their third cornerback. Screw the rest of this play, I'm throwing the go. That will happen sometimes. Kirk Cousins loved to do that. Sam Darnold loved to do that. And then you go to choice, the actual choice route, which is an option. And if you've ever played Madden, you're familiar with this. Somebody will can either settle down in a zone or break left or break right, depending on where the leverage of the defender is. You have to read it the same way as them, but either way, it's going to be a 5-yard route that breaks somewhere, and you try to throw it with timing. So ideally, you would set this with a 3-step drop. So you would step back, 1, 2, 3, and then throw. If you wanted to add a little hitch, you could get to the what kind of turns into the de facto 2 read, because the go route is just a peek. And maybe you're even deciding pre-snap, right? You alert that. If you didn't alert, if you don't throw it, then it just turns into a decoy route. And really your first read is the choice. And then you're reading bow like you did before. So you would go from 1 to 2. And in this particular case, bow, the basic, would be in the middle of the field by the time you get to it. By the time you take your 3 steps and hitch once, ideally that basic is just now clearing. That gives you enough time for your very fast receiver to just now clear that linebacker that you're trying to wait for him to get past. That has been put in conflict by the bow concept. That is either got to back up and be in the zone window, or, hug that arrow route and he's got to make a choice and you can make him wrong. So ideally, by that 3 steps and a hitch, then that second read basic is right there. This, by the way, idea is why Justin Jefferson catches so many passes in the middle of the field. This is it. This is what they're doing all the time. Defenses know it, try to defend it. Many of them fail. So if you don't like that, then you can go to the third route, which is an arrow. But the problem is that is a 5-yard hook route that's been sitting there being the third read in the back of all this stuff. It takes a long time to get over there, and it's pretty easy for somebody to hug that thing and take it away. So that arrow route has the option to uncover. Let's say there is a linebacker that is like just sitting there breathing down that arrow. That arrow is like TJ Hawkinson a lot. If he's just breathing down TJ Hawkinson's neck, well, TJ Hawkinson can start to work away from his leverage. And yeah, it messes with the spacing in the play, but you're late in the down at this point. You got to get rid of the ball. Do what you can. And he can uncover, and then the ball can go to his outside shoulder where he can hopefully get some yards after the catch, and you got at least a completion and you're moving. So all those little considerations are in this offense. And I guess the main point I want to make about pure progressions is that the Shanahan-McVay offense uses them and is very aware of the drawbacks that guys like Brady and Warner have talked about, that it's really difficult to time all these routes up unless they're all at different depths. And sometimes they are at different depths so that they time up perfectly. Sometimes there are options if you're the route that's later in the down where you can uncover or you can kind of adjust somehow. Sometimes there are sight adjusts. And the other thing I'll say about this is like there are plays like Dagger that do change with the concept. If it's single high, you'll do this. If it's too high, you'll do that. That Dagger is one of those. I won't draw it up and do the whole thing because we're short on time, but point being, these offenses understand those basic problems and try to make up for it in clever ways, but that doesn't make these legendary Hall of Fame quarterbacks wrong about it. It's just the versions of this kind of stuff that they're used to from their time playing isn't exactly what it looks like nowadays, at least best that I understand based on how I've been studying these specific systems for years and years doing this show. If I'm wrong, if I have a misunderstanding of it, I would love it if somebody could come tell me, hey, no, I worked in this system. This is what you got wrong. I would love that. I would love to learn a new thing. It's what I start every show with. But I'll leave that conversation here for now. I really wanted to weigh in on it, but we do have a Cowboys game coming up, so it is time to think about the Zoever under. Today on the Zoever under, we'll do a quick one on FanDuel. The Vikings are 6.5-point underdogs on primetime on Sunday Night Football. Dallas is seen as a pretty hot team right now. I mean, they're coming off of a couple of signature games against the Philadelphia Eagles and the Chiefs, and they are so they're white hot and they're making a playoff push. And obviously the Vikings are hanging on by a thread, still technically not eliminated. If you do want to root for playoff positioning, I think you need the Bears and Lions to both lose. Getting a loss out of the Bucs on Thursday Night Football was actually big because whichever team doesn't win the NFC South could still get that 7th seed if they win enough games. So you need those guys to finish below 8-9 so they don't screw up this tiebreaker thing. Essentially what you need at the end is a tie at 7th in the NFC between the Vikings, Bears, and Lions at 8-9. Or I'm sorry, at 9-8. If all of those teams are 9-8, the Vikings would have the tiebreaker. But what you need for that to happen is for the Bears to literally lose out and for the Lions to lose out with the exception of beating the Bears themselves in week 18 and for the Vikings to win out. So if you want to root for all that, go ahead, I guess. For us, the Vikings are 6.5-point underdogs and my Rabbits, of course, picked the game. They're 6-7, both of them on losing streaks. They're ice cold especially as Zoe has ever been. Last week, she did not pick the game, which usually means like a slot fest that nobody's happy with. Don't think we can give her that one. So she's 6-7, and they both went with the Dallas Cowboys at -6.5. So they're back on the Vikings haterade train, which has served them well. They jumped off it for a while. They got cold, but now the Vikings have not covered a lot of spreads this year. I think that was their 4th or 5th one, depending on what time of week you took certain things. It was their 4th and 5th one. Covering against the Washington Commanders. So we'll see what they can do against the Dallas Cowboys. But you guys all have some thoughts. You had some bold predictions, and I'm reading those next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It is such a beautiful time of year for sports with playoff pushes going on, big bowl games, big basketball matchups happening. It is all coming together. I love this time of year when it comes to sports, and PrizePicks is a great way to get even more engaged and make the right call. It's the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and bam, you are in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. PrizePicks has been my main squeeze when it comes to, there's a fun game on, but I don't really have a Vikings-related stake, so I'm going to put a PrizePicks down, and that way I have something to root for. The early payout feature is also a great bonus if something is happening and you feel like it's going your way and you don't want to expose yourself to a last-minute heartbreak. You can cash out early if that lineup starts out strong. And the new stacks feature allows you to put multiple stats from the same player into your lineup. So if you're really, really, really confident in Dak Prescott against the Vikings, you can take his passing yards and his rushing yards and his touchdowns if you want. Plus, deposits and withdrawals are super quick and easy. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. time for some bold predictions here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Very excited to get to these this week. First off, we can look at last week's bold predictions. I actually don't know if any hit. I didn't look. So let's see. The first one came from Tim Peets, said that Dallas Turner would obtain 3 sacks. We did not get there. The 9 who sold the world said that this one got really close. This would either be the best game of McCarthy's career or the worst game of McCarthy's career. So this was very much the best game of McCarthy's career, but there were specific statistical parameters about yards and touchdowns. I said it would be okay if 3 touchdowns was the case. So this was over 250 yards is what would be required for it to be the highest yardage game for McCarthy. And we didn't even get close to that, which is why I cannot honor this bold prediction. There was also some talk about, should it be 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns? I would have given you that, but I can't give you a sub 200 yardage game on this, even though EPA per play and stuff, it was the best. Lewandowski, actually, speaking of EPA per play, this one came from the 14-yard line that tackled Danny Dimes, said that the Vikings would win. They would have the top 3 points scored in the week, and that JJ would be top 3 in EPA per play. I think he was 4th in EPA per dropback on the week, which is such a bummer. If Matt Stafford didn't do what Matt Stafford did, he's the guy that ruined it. Blame the Rams. Lewandowski said that McCarthy would have the exact same stat line as the last 2 times that he returned from injury, where he both got 143 yards and 3 total touchdowns and 1 interception exactly. I think it ended up at 168, which is close enough that I probably would have given this to you. 3 total touchdowns you nailed, but without the pick. I think if McCarthy threw an interception in this game with all the rest of the stats staying the same, I probably would have given this to you, but you got to have the pick for it. Beef as on said that Justin Jefferson would have a career high in yards in a game with 229. We fell short of that by 218 yards. Number 9 is back, said that he would throw or run for a combined 3 touchdowns in the first half and all to the left. There were 3 touchdowns, but they were not all to the left and they were not in the first half. Alexis Texas had a whole thing about all of the oldest players on the Vikings having like no box score stats, which is pretty ruined by the Harrison Smith interception. And also CJ Ham had a fantastic game, so I probably wouldn't have given it to you anyways. And then Milo Graham said that there would be 3 fourth quarter lead changes, and obviously we didn't get that kind of game. So we are going to have to say that the streak is broken. No bold predictions this week. Let's see if we can do better in this Cowboys game. The first one comes from the hypothetical 7th seed, who says that the highest scoring game of the season for both the Cowboys and the Vikings would happen, but neither QB will get above 200 yards. Isn't that the way that it's gone? All of the wins that McCarthy has had, he's won 3 games as a Viking. All 3 of them, he's been under 200 yards. Look, there is something to that, in that when you're ahead and you run the ball a lot, you're not going to get as much passing volume. But obviously, that wasn't how the first 2, the Bears game and the Lions game that McCarthy won. That's not how those played out. Those were just kind of up and down days where he didn't have a great box score stat because he didn't play well for a bunch of both of those games. But so I guess that continues, and I guess we'll see it with Dak Prescott too with this bold prediction. Tim Peets says, as Vikings fans know, it's easy for quarterbacks to have too much to think about. On Sunday, Dak Prescott will complete a pass to Dallas Turner, likely under the mistaken assumption that a man named Dallas must be one of his teammates. Yeah, you're the Dallas Cowboys. You got to throw to Dallas. If you're not throwing to Dallas, what are you doing? So Dallas Turner interception, that's the bold prediction here. It's coming, man. I am so with you, Tim. The way that McCarthy played in coverage, he didn't get a lot of reps in this Washington game, which I actually found pretty baffling, but it's pretty hard to argue with what happened defensively in that game. Whatever game plan that was, I guess that worked. But when he backs off into coverage, especially in those hook zones, he's been playing a lot more aggressively. He's been jumping routes more aggressively. He's been backing off. He's been giving more space between him and the receiver that he's covering to try to bait that throw, and then he's getting in on it. And he even caused a tip that almost got intercepted a couple weeks ago, so that's part of it. I'm very with you on this, but a D-line interception is definitely plenty bold. Nines of the Old Republic, you're pandering to me, and I love it. Says that Josh Oliver has sneakily been one of the biggest contributors on offense all year. I predict he goes for 2 touchdowns and 100+ yards as JJ uses him to find his footing in a win. I'm not going to hold you to the win part. I will just say that JJ finds his footing with Josh Oliver. 2 touchdowns and 100 yards for Josh Oliver is plenty bold. JJ, the NFC East Slayer, says that McCarthy's confidence from the big win against the Commanders will lead him to have an even calmer mind against the Cowboys, leading to an EPA per play performance greater than Jordan Love's in week 4, which was 0.51, which is an astoundingly high number. And that was also the Cowboys, if I recall. I'm sure that's why you picked that game. For context, it was 0.4, 0.39, depending on how you round it, last week against the Commanders. So that nice game we're all real happy with JJ McCarthy paled in comparison to what is being projected here. Andy says that either Blake Cashman or Eric Wilson will get the game-sealing pass breakup on a 4th down, a la Eric Kendricks from the 2019 Dallas game. So this is what I'm going to have to do vibes-wise. Also, I'm sorry, it has to be Eric Wilson. He was on that team. You can't just throw Blake Cashman in there. It has to be an Eric Wilson pass breakup. So I am changing this to just an Eric Wilson pass breakup. That is a game sealer on 4th down in the style of Eric Kendricks from the 2019 Dallas game. What we mean by in the style, we'll figure that out in retrospect if it comes up. We've got a couple from Minnesota Sports Appreciator. Thank you so much for these submissions. Dak Prescott has the most passing yards in the NFL season, and JJ McCarthy among starters has one of the lowest yardage totals so far. He's ranked 33rd in the NFL. Dak Prescott has 3,637 passing yards. McCarthy has 1,092. In a wild turn of events, only seen during Vikings primetime games, JJ McCarthy throws for double the Dak Prescott passing yardage on Sunday Night Football. And then the second one from Minnesota Sports Appreciator says that Brandon Aubrey is known as one of the best kickers in the league, and Will the Thrill has been one of the better in the league this year. In this matchup, the total field goal yards from both kickers will equate to more yards than the offense production of wide receivers on both sides of the ball. I discussed this a little bit with Minnesota Sports Appreciator, and I decided we're going to go with receptions versus made kicks in general. That feels like a more interesting thing to watch. So there will be more made kicks than there will be receptions by wide receivers in this game. That's the bold prediction, which feels a lot bolder. Yards is weird because you can have like a game like last week where it goes through the tight ends a little more and the receivers end up getting, maybe 100, 200 combined, and then like a couple of 50-yarders and suddenly you're there. So I will say made kicks. Now I'm wording it that way very specifically to include extra points. Extra points count for this. So made field goals and extra points will add up to a higher number than all receptions between all receivers, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, etc. All receivers will have fewer receptions than there are made kicks in the game. I hope you all can enjoy this game. It's Sunday Night Football. The Vikings are on primetime. There's always something fun about that, even in a season that's not going great. So I hope you all can have a great time, and let's see if JJ McCarthy can pull it together with all of those pure progressions. Hope you learned something on this one. I will see you all next week. If you, by the way, if you had Locked On Vikings in your Spotify Wrapped, I would love to hear about it. Send me something. Show me a screenshot on Blue Sky if you're on that, or send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, or you can @LockedOnVikings on Twitter if you're still on that. There's still a Locked On Vikings account. Send it to that account. I would love to hear about all of it. I will see you all next week, right after the game, right here on Locked On Vikings. We'll be live. And as always, Skol.